sometimes it can go down a different road, and it's all good.
I played with the Black Duck Mills band too. I soloed with them. And, wow, I guess I don't know. It was in London. I can't remember what year it was.
That's something I did not know.
Yeah, well, I premiered the piece Concertino. What's his name? It's a for two trumpets. That's a good story. Oh boy, what's the guy's name? Jeez.
We're all new brass players, so we're not going to get this one.
Oh, it's a real popular piece.
I mean, there's a Vivaldi one.
No. This is a piece written by an English composer.
Come on, Aaron. He's not that old.
I don't know. I was like, hey, let me look up. Oh, I guess it was a premiere, wasn't it? Oh, my bad.
I'll find it.
Context clues are helpful, aren't it?
It's in my phone.
Tell us about the Vivaldi commission.
I can't remember.
that guy's going places, I hear. He might have something.
See. Recital, classical piece, PDFs, recital music. It should be in here. Horovitz.
Oh, okay.
That's who it is. I didn't even need to look it up.
Do you
wow.
With you?
Yeah, it was a concertino for two, and Manny Laureano from the Minnesota Orchestra and I did the premiere of it.
Wow. Is it for trumpets or cornets?
That's the story, actually. Behind that, I called up Manny, and we'll tell it on the air because people will like it. It's pretty funny. It's the piece. It was for the Black Dyke Mills band was doing it with us, and so I called up Manny. I said, look, we can't show up with trumpets, man. I said, so I got to get a cornet. So I got a Schilke cornet. And he had, I don't know, Monet or something. And, he went out and bought, a cornet, and I bought a cornet. So we practiced, and we got together the day before in London, and we practiced some, And then about an hour later, the composer shows up, and we're practicing, and he kind of comes in the room, and he goes, gentlemen. I said, oh, hi. Yeah, he says, where are your trumpets? I didn't even bring a trumpet. Actually, it was like we had to find trumpets and play them, and it was really weird. It was, but it was because he wanted to hear the difference between the trumpets and the brass band sound, but it didn't say trumpets on the part. When you play with a brass band, you assume it's cornet, and at the time, you couldn't really get in touch with people. It was like in the 1970s, you couldn't. Send them an email or something,
So did they even have trumpets laying around in London somewhere?
Oh, yeah, they had a lot of trumpets. It was at the Trumpet Guild. It was a Trumpet Guild convention.
Okay.
So there were a couple there for you.
Yeah, there was a plenty. Yeah, but it was easy to get a trumpet, but it was so different playing it on trumpet than it was on cornet. It was a whole different way of preparing. So we did all right. We got through it okay, but you're playing with this fantastic band, and Phil McCann actually was playing the first cornet part in the Black. He sounded great. Well, that whole band sounded tremendous. And what's his name was conducting? Peter Parks, I think.
Yeah. Well, that goes back a ways.
Oh yeah, that was 40 plus years ago. I'm pretty sure it was in maybe 1980, maybe it was a little later than that. Maybe it was 85. It was about 40, almost 40 years. Yeah. 35 years.
How long after that did it take you to decide to start a brass band of your own? Like, didn't you have a lot to do with Battle Creek starting up or Lexington?
No, that was the Gray Brothers. Lexington Brass Band, Ron, really, and a guy named Mike Swaffer, he was a Yamaha rep.
Yeah.
And that was the time when brass bands were, there weren't very many in the U.S. Only the Columbus was the first one, I believe. That was a steady every week thing besides Salvation Army bands. And so that was kind of the model for American brass bands. And we started maybe a year later or two, in Lexington. And Ron Holtz was really the moving force behind it. And I was glad to play, just to play because I'd never really done that much. So it was something for me to learn. And learn the literature. You know,
What was the motivation to make that happen? Like, did y'all just wake up one day and you're like, you know what? I liked Cornet. That was fun. Let's bring that back.
No, it wasn't like that really. What it really was trying to, have another community bands really were really on the downswing for probably 20 years by that time, and learning to play an instrument besides public school music was almost non-existent in America, except for a few diehard bands like the Reading Band in Pennsylvania and a few other, community bands in large cities and stuff like that. But brass bands were traditionally in really small towns. They weren't, that big. They were only 20, 20 some players, 23. And, some of them were bigger. Lexington was bigger than that. It was about 30 because we really weren't competitive at first. They wanted to compete. I didn't really like competing. I felt like, it was kind of funny, as a person that made a living playing trumpet to compete with people that were amateurs and stuff. I just, I didn't know. I felt funny about that. I just thought it wasn't. But I did it a few times because Ron wanted me to play and stuff, so I did it. But I didn't really like the competition part of it myself. But I nothing wrong with it. I mean, I loved going and hear the groups. That was fantastic. And today, I mean, the brass band at Columbus, St. Louis, New Jersey, I forget the name of that band.
Atlantic
Brass Band, right? And Lexington Brass Band.
Who's the Atlantic Brass Band? We don't know anything about that.
What's his name? Sal Scarpa.
Yeah, Amy played principal euphonium in Atlantic for a while.
Yeah, like almost 10 years.
Sal Scarpa was a good arranger. He was a good trombone player, and I thought he turned out to be a really fine director. I didn't, I only saw him maybe once a year, so I really can't, say I know everything about him. But he was a really great arranger too at Eastman. Went to Eastman in the summers and fantastic, mind for arranging and stuff like that. So those bands really became models. And of course, NABBA sort of started right around that early time. And, there was, I think there weren't that many groups, that really, and then they started to develop. And Yamaha was instrumental in helping because they had alto horns and, tenor horns and things. And I think they were interested also in the business part of a brass band. So, good euphoniums, compensating euphoniums, all those different types of things, They kind of, and E-flat cornets, Schilke made an E-flat cornet, and there's really still the kind of standard of the E-flat cornet. But there are others that are, Yamahas are good too. So, but I think it was a kind of a combination of people that, played in Salvation Army bands. I mean, I went and played with Ron's band, I don't even know how many times, in Asbury College, when it was Asbury College and not Asbury University, but Ron was one of the most important factors in the development of the brass band in America. His dad was the conductor of the New York Staff Band way back, and him and Phil Smith were kind of like, they spent every summer together at the Salvation Army camps, teaching and playing in the groups. And many of the other people, many of the directors of the first brass bands that weren't Salvation Army bands were Salvation Army people. Yeah. And they had Salvation Army connections. So, and of course the music at the time, you really weren't supposed to play any Salvation Army music. It wasn't, it was a kind of you couldn't do it. You weren't supposed to do it. There was a few arrangements that you could use sort of. But now, Salvation Army is selling all that music, and that's great because some of the arrangements are just iconic, brass band sounding and orchestrations, and everybody needs to hear all that too, because now the arrangers in the U.S. are getting really good at writing brass band music because they've heard all these scenarios that have happened over 150 years of bands, you know, starting back in England, the company bands and everything. Ron wrote 2 really good books about the brass band movement and everything. They're fantastic. My first, you know,
Salvation Army books, right? About the Salvation Army starting in the United States, and
right.
yeah, I've read those. Yeah.
Oh, they're great, and it, you know, it ties a lot of stuff together. If you're into brass banding, and you know, it's really a good thing to read because it explains a lot of the things about it. And of course, like I say, Ron was very instrumental, and I mean, Ron was tireless. Ron Holtz in doing, he still is. I mean, he's still doing stuff down in Atlanta. His brother's down there still, and so he's always subbing into the band and doing things, you know, and writing arrangements still. Some of his arrangements are fantastic too. All of the ones I've heard are really, really fine arrangements. He did ones for me of Bernard Fitzgerald pieces and other things, you know, that he just said, well, this would be nice for brass band. I'll do it. And, you know, a week later he's done and you're playing it, you know. I mean, written by hand because he didn't really use the notation, you know, electronic notation. So, I mean, Ron was just always busy. And I said, Ron, you know, how come you're not as good as your wife? Because she's even worse. She did the choirs at Asbury, and she was the greatest teacher there. I used to just get there early because hear her sometimes rehearsing her choirs because she was so good at it, you know. And that's an important part, I think, of a lot of the brass band music comes out of the singing school, really, when you think about it, because most people don't realize that a lot of the Salvation Act was to accompany singing and to accompany the recruitment effort of the Salvation Army. So there was a lot of different aspects, and music was always one of the biggest aspects because it was out in the public. You know, the church services that they had, the Salvation Army services, were, you know, they were more private and they were formal. And so I've been to a few, so I don't know if they're all like that, but you know, but the things they do in public, and also, you know, my father-in-law, who passed away a few years ago, he was a lifetime supporter of the Salvation Army in Danville, and I mean, he did a lot of things for them, and everything from helping them get vehicles because he's a car dealer, and yeah, so I mean, he was always helping out. We would go to the dinners and everything, you know, it was just wonderful. And that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed it, because I knew how much the mission of that group was to help people. I didn't really, you know, that's the important thing in everything we do is to help people, whether it's a brass band that's you know, outside the Salvation Army or one that's inside. It's all meant to help people, and like I said, with the decline of the American community band, you know, they used to be supported by towns, sort of like the brass bands were supported by companies. And some of them are still like that. I mean, I went to Vermont. I'm trying to think of where in Vermont it was, but they still rehearsed in the basement of the town hall. Huh. They were still supported by the mayor's office, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm sure that's more of an anomaly nowadays.
Exactly. You know, but in a way, that's kind of a good thing in a sense when you look at it from the positive point, if there is one, is the fact that you have total control over what you do. You're not beholden to many, you know, entities aside from the people in the band and the people who help you put it on.
Oh, we need you to play this ribbon cutting ceremony.
What'd you do? Which one?
We need you to play this ribbon cutting ceremony.
Oh, yeah.
We can't play that gig. No, you have to.
Yeah, you know, it's okay. It's all right, you know, doing a few things. I mean, I never really judge the event as much as what it's going to do for people. Yeah. You know, nothing matters to me more than how it affects people. And Lexington Brass Band, I enjoyed that a lot. Well, like I said, I played with the Lexington Brass Band early on, made the earliest recordings. We went to Midwest, and I played. What did I play? Hedger Cotty, Raphael Mendez thing.
Yeah, I remember playing. I was in the band with you.
Yeah.
Played that a lot.
And Ronnie used to go faster and faster at the end.
And the parts were like there were like only four lines per page, so there's like 11.
Oh yeah.
So you're just like going like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Could you like make these things a little bit fewer pages?
Ron.
You were turning pages all day.
But we had a good time. I said, "You just keep going, Ron. I think I can keep up. It's in the key of F. Only need 2 fingers." So yeah, it was great. But I loved doing the Lexington Brass Band because of Ron. Ron was so passionate about it always, and he used to get people nervous, because he was so serious about, getting everything done, but I understood that. I got that, the only time I ever used to stop, I said, Ron, give me a chance to put the mouthpiece on there, okay? He used to get right up and start. I mean, he would start. And by the time I got my horn up, I'd already missed the first 2 bars,
Yeah, he was all business. I think there was a time in the Lexington Brass Band where you and Terry Everson were sitting on the front.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, matter of fact, we played Santa Claus is Coming to Town at the Midwest.
Yeah, I remember
together.
that.
We did that together. And the first place I played that was with Battle Creek.
Yeah, okay.
And that was with Danny. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. That's terrible. I can't remember his last name. Danny was a great trumpet player. He passed away about 2 years ago, 2 or 3. And he was just a great player. He was a very unique person, and people thought he was really a pussycat, but people were afraid of him. And I used to go, you talk about Danny Barber, and yeah, and they used to talk. I say, are you talking about the same Danny that plays with me in Battle Creek? You get along with him? I said, yeah, he's great. I said, well, you're one of the only guys he likes then. He doesn't like anybody. I said, oh, you got to get with him. I mean, he's very shy actually, but he doesn't like people to push on him. I said, and he gets, he gives you a little feedback. So, but me and Danny played that first with Battle Creek, and we recorded it actually on the Christmas album, the Battle Creek Christmas, which is one of my all-time favorite things that I've ever done, was play on that Christmas album.
Yeah, some of those early Battle Creek albums were spectacular.
They really were. They were, well, it was new, and there were really, really great players from the U.S. and some from England. And, and that was helpful, because when we played traditional brass band music, I knew exactly what to do. Just listen to, Steve Meade, and listen to, whoever else was Billy, Crazy Billy, the alto horn player. He was something else. But he was a great player. He was like one of those paid players in England. He was one of those people who, yeah. And I mean, you just listen to them play, and it's live. It's different than listening to recordings of English brass bands. They sound great too, but when you hear those players playing that way, you're ready to just hop right in there and do it. And at the same time, I hope that they brought back to England some of the things that we did with American music in the brass band.
Yeah.
There used to be some blowback on, you should be playing cornets on everything. I said, no, you don't. I said, Harry James never played a cornet. And I'm playing a Harry James tune. I'm not playing a cornet. There's no way. It's just not going to happen. Didn't go over real well, but I still played trumpet, and I did it every time we did that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't sound like the music. It's an American brass band, and that was the great thing about Battle Creek, and I think it still is. Just they still, there's a component to it that's not an English brass band.
Right.
You know, the jazz playing is very much American
Yeah.
jazz playing. It's not like, you know, if you hear recordings of things like even We Three Kings.
Yeah.
Okay.
The King
Well,
Swing.
yeah. Okay. Well, you know, an English brass band, they sound wonderful, and the soloists just and there's no chord changes.
Right.
So I sat down and wrote out the actual chord changes to because they're not like the regular We Three Kings. There's all these chromatic changes in it, you know, and everything. Because the first time I played through it, I was going, "Oh man, this solo doesn't work." It was a written out solo.
Right.
I said, I can't play that. It just didn't. It wasn't me, you know. I mean, I'm trying to improvise it and play. It didn't sound like I. So I said, let me just write this out because it was only about 16 bars long or something, you know.
Yeah.
So I just kind of penciled in. We read through it, and I wrote the chord changes out as they were playing, so that I didn't have to play at the same time, you know.
Right.
And they did it twice, and then I had pretty much, you know, gotten it. And I love playing that. See, the whole album is just like my favorite. We did what do you call it? 12 Days of Christmas.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another one. See, but it was uniquely American.
Yeah.
You know, and
I remember.
Yeah.
Were you still playing in the band when they went to Cincinnati for the NABBA Gala concert in 2002?
I don't think so.
They
I played. I was there. I played with I played a solo with the Lexington Brass Band.
Yeah.
I played Nessun Dorma.
Okay.
With the band. I remember that because it was fun to do. And you know, I played with them for about, I don't know, at least 10 years, I believe. It was probably around 10 years. And then, you know, I think they just started switching people around and trying to get a different sound out of the band, you know, and that's fine. You know, I think it's a good thing for things to morph into something else, you know.
Yeah.
And otherwise you're in a narrow kind of lane, you know.
Yeah.
That's what's great about a lot of the bands like your bands in North Carolina. They branch out to, you're doing all kinds of different music. And of course then your audience is bigger too. And who says music should always stay the same, you know? If it's not in the contest literature or if it's not in the traditional literature that, you know, that goes down the years,
Yeah.
well, if you stay there, well, all those people are going to disappear and you're not going to have any audience.
Yeah.
Because,
That's what's great about brass bands is they're so versatile. They can play so many genres.
Exactly. And, you know, and I played with the band and Gabriel was in, the one Gabriel was in, with a euphonium player for UK, conductor. It meets in like Winston-Salem.
Oh, the North Carolina Brass Band.
Yeah. Yeah, I played with them, with Gabriel, and it was great fun. It was a nice group, you know, and see, but I think the thing about American brass bands, Brass Band of Battle Creek is kind of a professional gig, like, you know what I mean? You get paid and all that. But traditional brass bands, except for a few, you know, people they bring in to solo, nobody gets paid. Yeah. Everybody lives there or lives in the general vicinity, and they have their own little band room in some old hut or something, you know. I mean, I went to some great brass band rehearsals in England. I mean, I was just Corey band. The Corey band, I went to their rehearsal, and you know what I noticed besides all the trophies was they rehearsed upstairs, you know.
Yeah.
And when I got into the staircase, the thing that impressed me the most was the fact that on the edges of the stairs, it was that thick. And in the middle, it was that thick. All the people had walked up those stairs.
Oh, yeah.
To that band room forever. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, whoa. I mean, that just blew my mind. You know, I was doing a tour for Shilky trumpets, and one of them was in, in Wales. And so he said, "You want to go hear the Corey band? They're rehearsing tonight." I said, "Oh yeah, man, are you kidding? Let's go." So I went to hear them, and then and afterwards they have a room in this pub that nobody uses except them. It's empty the rest of the week. Nobody uses it. It's their room. And I imagine they must have parties in there or something occasionally, but it was fantastic. And all these people, they not only did they enjoy the rehearsal, they enjoyed the getting together afterwards and talking and laughing and, drinking and staying there to who knows when. I had to leave. I was so tired. I was going, I gotta have to go, guys. I'm sorry, but they said, "Oh, that's okay. We'll be here quite a while longer." And they would just stay until it was over. But that's the part in the American brass band that is not as strong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Americans approach even brass banding from a community band standpoint, where you come, you play the rehearsal, and then you leave. And brass banding is more about the community and the culture, and you hang out with these people, you're friends with these people, you spend a lot of time with these people. So you go out drinking and you go out to dinner and you go contesting weekends and spend the whole week. These are your
right, exactly.
And we struggle to get that aspect of it in American brass bands.
Well, there's of course there's some cultural differences, like the size of the place you live.
Yeah.
Their jobs. Most families have both parents working.
Yeah.
And stuff. And I mean, it's really challenging here because everybody complains about like socialize this and socialize that. But when it comes to countries like Norway, you don't have to worry about watching your kid for 4 hours because it's paid for by the government. You can do things. There's some leeway. That was the most amazing thing when I went to places and learned. They'd say, "Oh, I'm going to go drop off Mike here at the where? Oh, at the our nursery place." I said, "Wow," because everything's so expensive, and in Norway, you go there, man. You spend $40 for lunch, and you only get one piece of bread with some meat on it, and that's it. It's $40. So, but the people, they have free. I mean, nothing's free, but the way it's organized is they pay a 21% value added tax. You don't get it back for nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are, you pay the tax. And then all those things like your health care are paid for. And child care for a certain amount of time. And if you need more, you pay a minimum amount to have more time. So it's a different system. And therefore, the social parts of everything changes because of that. You have a night when brass band nobody does anything except that. That's it. Right. You don't have to worry about having a conflict. Well, I got to do this. I can't do that. How many of you can make it? No, I can't make it this week. And I mean, I wouldn't think of that hardly in any, a British or Scandinavian brass band. I mean, right. And they also grow up in that band.
A lot of them, yeah.
See, like that was one thing about the Advocate band. I don't know if you remember, but Gabriel sat right next to me. My son.
I can't remember if he was he may have been too young. I don't think he was playing yet when I was there.
Yeah. Well, once he started to play, he really couldn't read music. I never forced him to do anything because I just didn't. I wasn't that type of person. But finally one day he said, "Yeah, well, I think I want to play a little more." I said, "Well, okay, well then you're gonna play in the town band with me." And he said, "Well, I can't really read. You'll get it. Don't worry." So he would sit next to me, and I'd play the first time through the marches and stuff like that. I'd say, "Okay, you play the second time through." Of course, at first he couldn't do any of it.
Yeah.
But when you have to do it, it's almost like the person you throw in the water and say, "Okay, swim. Here's a life preserver. Try to swim a little bit, and then we'll see how long it takes you to learn to swim." And see, brass banding is a lifetime experience. it's not the community band you play in for 3 years.
Right.
You know, it's not that at all. So the cultural difference and the size of the town. I mean, the brass band in most of those towns, whether it was a company band in the 1800s or it continued into the 20th century and still goes on, and they become a little less like that. They're sponsored by usually one or two big sponsors or something like that usually, but I don't know what they're doing now. I haven't been in the English mode.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amy. Go ahead, Amy.
I was just saying that I think with that cultural difference is that I remember little kids sometimes just being at rehearsal in some of the bands. And I mean, there was one time that I was sitting there and then another person was sitting two chairs down, and between us was her kid with a pocket trumpet, just, you know.
Make them believe.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think
That's
that their community music making is is lifelong, and many of these kids don't even remember a time
But
that
they
they weren't
didn't.
that they didn't play, because by the time they have established memories,
Yeah, that's
they've
right.
been mixed in with the brass band or community ensembles. And so I think that is a huge reason why so many people after high school in the UK continue to play music. We have this big problem in the US, in my opinion, that people put away their instrument and that's it, they're done. But in the UK, a much larger percentage of people are continuing to play throughout their lives.
I used to gig down in West Palm, like in jazz bands and stuff like that, and we'd have these old blue hair people come up to us. They'd be
Like
like,
me.
you were no, they I wasn't good, yeah. But so they would come up and they'd be like, you remind me of my grand cousin who played kazoo in the Sousa band. You know, these kind of people, and like bless their heart. They paid a lot of money to be there. And the amount of times that somebody would go, oh, I used to march clarinet in the high school band, or whatever. And the answer is always this. The answer has always been, when I ask them, oh, do you still play? They always go, no, comma, but I wish I still did. Every single one of them ends with that tag of, I wish I still did. And there's also seems to be this intimidation of like, oh, you're like, when they become empty nesters or whatever, going back and playing clarinet in the brigade band of their Waynesboro, Virginia town. But it's a thing. Like they would be welcome to have you. I feel like they feel like they have to be these like virtuosos to come back.
Well, that was the good part about the Advocate Band in Danville. That started in approximately 1987, and the reason it started, which is we needed something to do, and it didn't really. It happened because of a political event. Actually, Danville is known as the city of firsts. They had the first post office east of the Alleghenies, the first this, the first that, and they have all these plaques in the near the courthouse that has all that information on it. But so they decided to have the first political debate of the governor's race of that year and all the other candidates in the different offices in Danville. And they were going to do it old style. They're going to have like a hay wagon and all that, which is what they did. So they said, well, we got to have a band for this, because there was always a band at these things way back, So they asked George Foreman to put a band together, and he had a whole bunch of music that he had from Iowa when he was there. And he called me, and I actually couldn't do it because I was going to be away, I thought. So I had one of my, Paul Klontz he actually ended up playing in the Army Herald Trumpets for about 20 years. And Paul played, and actually I could go because my gig got canceled, but I wasn't going to, take him out of the job. I just said, I'm just going to go and see this thing. And so the first performance was in 1987 at the preliminary, the very first rally debate for the governor. And it was pretty neat. And I said, boy, this is really cool. And I told George Foreman at the time, I said, George, I would have played, but I didn't want Paul to, not play. So he says, I said, but why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Get this band together. I said, this would be a lot of fun. And he thought I was kidding. He thought I was like, what's this guy going to play in this band? I said, no. I said, I'd love to do it. So he called it, and everybody started calling the newspaper because Mary Shores, the lady that ran the newspaper, she kept getting calls saying, when is the band going to play again? Everybody kept asking when the band was going to play. So she called up George and said, George, look, we got to get some concerts together in the park or something. So that's how the Advocate Band really started. And then we and George, we're always hanging out together. They used to say, you guys are not allowed to meet for more than 5 minutes, and we have to be able to see you. Because every time we did something, it was going to be some kind of a production. And that's how the band festival started.
Yeah.
Me and George.
How did the Advocate Band feed into or build up into the festival starting?
Okay. Well, George and I were headed to Cincinnati for, believe it or not, a postcard show. Because George collects any kind of band memorabilia. We were just on the phone today. I'm picking up this poster for him of I forget her name, Claire something. She was a female cornetist back in the 1880s. Great cornet player. And there's a big color poster of her. So I'm going to pick it up on my way back from Interlaken. And he wants that one, so I'm buying that for him, and he's going to give me one of his others. He's got tons of them. But anyway, we went to the postcard show, and on the way there, I said, well, George, the band's pretty good. Why don't we, have a day of music, Something where, and I'll call up people like, Empire Brass, the Canadian Brass or somebody. We'll see if we can get them to come and have, some local bands, and, it'll be fun. I said, we got this band called the Kentuckiana Brass. It's all college teachers. I said, yeah, they'll play. We want to play. That's a good group. And so we had we put it together, this program. And George calls about 2 weeks later, and he says, Vince, what do you got tomorrow afternoon? I said, well, I got a student at 3, but I probably can change it. What do you need? He says, well, you have to come to Danville. You have to come home, and we're going to have a meeting of the Great American Brass Band Festival Commission. I said, what the heck is that? He goes, don't you remember we were talking about, getting this thing? George had already organized the whole thing. He got it all together. He says, now we just have to get those groups. So let's talk. Let's get, we'll get that. So I called up some people, and before you know it, and at that very first festival, 17,000 people showed up.
Wow.
That was the very first festival.
Holy cow.
1,000?
Yeah, 17,000. Well, there was advertising. Vanity Fair put a thing in it. And, it was voted one of the top things to go to in Kentucky that summer or something. George is, his job is promoting music.
Yeah.
That's what he did with the series. I mean, we had the Vienna Philharmonic in Danville. How many people have had the Vienna Philharmonic? The shirts were great, man. The shirt said, on the back, it said, Town Hall, New York City, Center College, Danville, Kentucky. That was the only 2 places they went.
Wow.
They stayed here for a week in Danville.
That's awesome.
I remember seeing the Montreal Symphony.
Montreal, right. Montreal, Philadelphia was there. And George, before he left, we were just starting to work on Chicago Symphony. Because they always performed in Champaign-Urbana before they started their regular season.
Yeah.
And we were working on getting the orchestra on that trip, see.
That would be cool.
But he left, and, But yeah, we had Russian orchestra almost every other year. We had chamber music, Lincoln Center, chamber players.
Well, the town seems to really get behind it. I mean, I've only done the festival once. I did it with the Salvation Army band.
Right,
with National Capital, but we bunked in I think it was maybe college dorms or something like that. We got put up in something that was the Salvation Army had to they worked it out for us, but it was brought up by some organizer for the thing. It seems like the town seems to get behind the art pretty well.
That was really the thing I liked the most about the festival besides just the music part of it, was every year everybody did something. You know, whether they helped, fold shirts up for the, or they were setting up chairs and tables for the picnic, or they helped bring the bands on and off, and most everybody wasn't paid. I never made a nickel playing at the, organizing the band festival. A couple of times I actually got paid for playing in the Advocate Band. Yeah, it was great, but Caleb Hudson played in the Advocate Band.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah, he played in the Advocate Band. And you know how that happened? I judged him in a festival in England, and I'd never met him before, but Rich Bird was his teacher. And he kept telling me about this student he had. He said, man, this kid, forget it. He says he can play anything I give him. He works on it until he gets it, I said, well, I'll have to meet him sometime. So I went to judge this festival in England. It was at the Trumpet Guild. It was in Manchester. And his name was on this list. I said, well, this must be the kid from Lexington, Kentucky. I didn't know who he was, except he was from Lexington. I said, it's got to be him. I said, because nobody I know plays like Rich says this guy does. Yeah. So anyway, he won the competition, and he was there with his mom, and his mom, their family is just wonderful people. And so at the end of the competition, I said, well, Caleb, I said, that was just great. Rich has told me a lot about you. And what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to come and play that Grand Russian Fantasia with the town band in Danville. And you'll be paid for that. And he went, wow, that'd be great. So he came and played it, man, and he just killed it. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And so then he said, his mom came up to me afterwards. She said, do you think it'd be all right if he came and played in the band? See, because they could see the value.
Yeah.
And I said, he'll sit exactly where Gabriel sat, right next to me, and we'll play together.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the coolest thing about playing in that band is like in the spring and in the fall, there was a 3-concert series. And I remember sometimes Earl Lauder would play.
Yeah.
And like one of the finest euphonium players you'll ever hear. And he played solos all the time. You played solos almost every concert.
Ted Haley. Do you remember Ted Haley?
No.
He was the euphonium player.
Yes. Yes.
That was the original euphonium player. And Ted, I think he did something like built electric power plants or something. I don't know what he did. He was an engineer of some sort. But he had all of his euphonium solos memorized.
Yeah.
The guy, he played them and he just play them down. And and then he played cello too. And he was a great guy.
Let's talk about that.
He was great. But that's the beauty of brass bands all over the world, is that people learn they learn a lot of things from the people they sit next to.
Yeah.
Like, Gabriel sitting next to me, learned to read music. He learned how to, be a member of the band. He started to learn what to say and what not to say, and all those things. And you're dealing with people that, see, I think that when they create, I don't know, what do you call them, community centers, they ought to have 2 kinds of people there. Retired people or older people that have time to give, and young kids that need a place to go after school.
Yeah.
And we're working on that now in some ways in Danville. Yeah. Because I mean, like I said, there's people that kids go home and there's nobody there, and they need people to mentor them and to help them with their homework and to do all these things. And in a lot of cases, the parents are doing the best they can, but they can hardly get by. Today everything's so expensive, and the amount that, look at what healthcare costs, right? People are paying $10,000-$12,000 for healthcare a year, and they're only making $25,000 or $30,000.
Yeah,
that's just not workable. You can't. So people are just working to keep their kids fed, clothed, you know, and keep the family together. And so it's very challenging. So I think that there needs to be a shift. Brass bands could be one of these things. You know, if communities, they have things like this. They have too many groups. They have too many different things. Everybody's trying to help, but there's 10 people in this group, and they raise money. But if you took the 20 groups that are in Danville, and you all picked out the same project for a month, there'd be a pretty good chance that it would get pretty much underway or done. So I think that's where groups like the Salvation Army are fantastic, because see, they are a hub for the community and their music, and a regular town brass band can do the same thing, maybe not quite as well as a Salvation Army, but in a different perspective. People who don't feel comfortable, let's say, doing a Salvation Army, or it's a different thing for their family. They don't want, but other music can be very, very helpful, because it brings all these ages together, especially regular brass bands, that like the traditional ones from England. They play until they can't hold their horn anymore.
And I think that a lot of brass bands in the United States could start youth bands, because they can do a lot of good.
Well, your band is fantastic. I mean, they came to the band festival. It was great. I played Macarena with them. I remember.
I remember that. Yeah.
Oh no,
we have 3 of them now.
Yeah, but I'm saying that. But that just proves what we're saying.
Yeah.
People, the parents and the kids, are looking for a reason to do well.
Yeah.
They're not out there to make trouble and do this and that. They would really rather be a place where they feel comfortable. And brass bands, like I say, they have those blue hairs. They got the blue hairs, they got the medium-aged people, and they got the young people. They have a whole spectrum, and you can have lots of mentors in that group then. Some people feel like they want a grandfather figure, Another person wants somebody just like them to hang out with. Another person, they hardly get to be with somebody in their family that, they really want to be with, and they find somebody like that in a community group of some sort. And band is a great thing, because there's a commonality there. It's not just like a service group. There's a commonality of understanding in music and growth, with the brass band, when I was conducting, I wish I could have done it longer, but when my father-in-law passed away, I really needed to be home a lot more. But I never conducted the band. I just stood there. As soon as things started to go awry, I just stopped conducting.
Yeah.
And they stopped. Everything would just. I said, you really need a conductor? I said, all I have to give you is my ears.
Yes.
I said, I want you to show me what you want to do with this music. And if you don't want to play in tempo, well, I can't make you play in tempo. I said, I really don't want to do that. And I stopped the band a lot. And I'd say, okay, what are we supposed to be listening to here? Does anybody know? Because that's the secret to improving the level of the band, is to improve the knowledge and the ears and the ability of the players in it. Otherwise, it's like beating a horse until it wins a race and then it dies.
Yeah. Well, that's the true brass band tradition, is that the people that stand in front of brass bands are trainers. They're band trainers.
Right.
Okay. And in America, when there's an opening with a brass band, they try to find a degreed college professor to stand in front of the band. And
that doesn't work.
They're not necessarily band trainers. So it goes back to that wind ensemble, American band, community band process. And the best bands are the ones that have brass players standing in front of them, training them how to be brass players and band, and musicians.
I think it's a combination of understanding people and trying to constantly, but passively, keep people thinking about the community that they're in, that brass band community, and the value of what you're doing on a week-to-week basis. You know, Lexington Brass Band, I mean, Ron, you know, he was a traditionalist when he conducted the band. Mm-hmm. He still, I doubt if he's changed a lot, you know, and he would, you know, he would expect people to be ready, and he'd tell them what they needed to do, and if they didn't do it, you know, he'd just go, well, gee, you know.
He would get snippy.
Yeah, he would. Well, you know, anybody, I used to call Ron up at school when he was teaching, you know. I'd say, hey, Ron, what's going on? And he'd go, well, let's see, today was it was a pretty busy day today. And he'd go through this litany of stuff that he had done. He says, oh, well, why did you call? I'm sorry. I'd say, well, I was feeling bad about how hard I'd worked today. And if I called you, I'd see what a slug I really was. And I could just go right back to work. And he would just laugh, you know. But it was true. I mean, he was just a nonstop, and B is the same way. Nonstop workers. You know, they always had a mission every day. You know, they were there.
Sounds like we have to do a podcast with Ron Holtz.
Oh, you got to. He's the greatest. He really is. I mean, he's the, well, he comes from, you know, the long tradition. It's his dad was the link between the British brass bands, you know, the Salvation Army band in New York, and then the camps in America. So Ron is the link, really, and people like him. Phil Smith and Phil's dad, because Phil's dad took over after Ron's dad, I believe. I believe that's right. And you know, and that's really, really exciting, because you see that's an important aspect of the whole thing. That's why it breaks down in America, because of the societal differences, you know, and also the extreme differences in population, you know. And it's the great part about America, and it's also the part that's the hardest, because some things just don't fit together real well, you know, and the expectations should be and are great for the country, but when you're in a country that is much more in a narrower, you know, perspective, and even though they have the same economic problems and stratification of the population, and all that's not that different, but the cultural part of the towns. I mean, you look at the map of England, and if you can take London, and it's just like a megapolis, or whatever they call that, you know. It's just, but then you get outside there, and there's a Manchester, you know, and there's a, you know, couple of cities here and there, and the rest of it's all sheep and goats and cows, you know, and some seaports along the way, you know, and it's the same thing in a sense in the U.S. Like New York. You think about New York, you say, oh, New York, man, there's too many people there. Well, yeah, in New York City there is, but there's only 5 cities in the whole state: Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and New York City. And the rest of it is like Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kentucky has probably a bigger percentage of people living in cities than New York does. Because I mean, it's a much bigger state too. It's spread out, you know. So there's a lot of, and there's differences. And of course, there's other differences in our country. There's just, the populations, I think, all over are becoming, you know, more diversified in every country, you know. So that's been a challenge, and of course, our country here started doing that a little earlier, in a way. I think, you know, maybe Australia would be ahead of us, possibly, or New Zealand or something like that. I don't really know. I mean, that's something I wouldn't put much credence in what I just said, except it's my guess, you know. But yeah, I mean, there's been Civil War, and I mean, all these things happened 150 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's stratified this country a little bit more than, you know, than maybe some other countries who didn't have that type of a.
Yeah, England's Civil War was way too long ago.
Yeah, really back there.
They need a recent one.
Yeah, but the band movement. I mean, I think you can take your Columbus, Ohio, as a bigger city that's done a good job with being able to. Of course, what's his name? Oh boy,
Paul Drosty's up there.
Paul,
yeah,
and his son. They were special people again, and what's his name? And Sousa Byerly, Paul Byerly.
Yeah,
he's the Sousa expert. And of course, he had a big part in that band. Danny King, who was a student of mine at UK.
Right.
Danny was principal cornet, and he's still up there doing brass band. And Egan, Bob, I think it's Bob Egan. He plays second chair in that band. And and also, like Rich Burkhart, he is sort of alone and Danny King and his wife really watch out for him. And I think one of the things is the way he's been in this band. It's helped to make him feel more like, because Danny went to England on a fellowship to study being a principal cornet in a brass band and learning more of the cultural aspect as well as the playing part.
That would have been way back in the 80s, right?
Yep, 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
And I think the people that are lucky enough to have spent more time in brass bands in England and in Norway and Sweden and places like that are in a much better position than to talk about this than I am, really, because their experience is so much more complete. Mine is I've played with a lot of different brass bands all over the place, so I have a little bit of a sketch of things. But when you talk to some people that really play in a community brass band in a different country, they have a completely different way of looking at what goes on in the brass bands here. And I don't know. I think it's in America they made tremendous progress with brass bands, considering there was no culture at all to start, really, except the lack of bands, of community bands, and the brass band became a new version of a community band. Yeah, and of course, then it was a new literature and different instruments and competition, which I think some people really like that, and I think that's good. And of course, just guest soloists and listening to music. Brass band players listen to music a lot, because they have to learn what it's supposed to sound like. You can't do that in a rehearsal. You'd get your headaches, bad headaches.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you on this podcast is because you've been involved in many of the big time things in the brass band movement, the Great American Brass Band Festival, Brass Band of Battle Creek, Lexington Brass Band in the early days, all the soloist engagements that you've done. Mm-hmm. You've been in it without maybe intentionally doing it. You've been an ambassador for brass bands for the bulk of your career. So it was great to spend some time talking to you with some of your recollections of all of these things while we were.
Well, you can tell that I love it. That's really, I loved going to rehearsals and working with Ron. I loved the different conductors we had with the Brass Band of Battle Creek. The players in there were very unique and special. And when we played together, it was, pretty marvelous. And then going around to different bands and sometimes rehearsing them. They'd ask me if I'd conduct a tune. I'd say, "Oh boy, that'd be great." I said, "I'm not a conductor, but I'll see what I can do to help." And that's fun. If you can be an asset to some community, that has the greatest value.
Yeah.
You know, if I go to New York and play the Haydn Trumpet Concerto in Carnegie Hall, which I've played solos there, it doesn't mean as much to me. I mean, it just doesn't. You know, somebody's in the audience going, well, his Haydn is quite good. You know, I don't know if I like it as much as this other person. I'm going, who cares? You're there to listen to music. You know, that's all that matters. And, you know, I play, actually at Lake Cumberland right now. We have a house down here.
Uh-huh.
And this summer, I had my mask and everything. I played in the church that I used to call it the Addams Family Church because it was covered with, like, you know, you couldn't get in it. It was closed. And they opened it up as a satellite church for the people that went out on their boats. They'd go there for, you know, like 45 minutes and then they were off on their boats. So I went there and played. And I've been playing there, you know, like every couple of months.
Yeah.
I played at the Russell Springs Church and I played at Scott Hershey's church as much as I can, and at Danville, the Christian church in Danville, and most of it's volunteer. You know, it's something that you can do because you can do it. So I think that, you know, that's part of the thing that's changed over the years, and not because people don't want to do it for free or be an asset like that, is they don't have the time or the money to do it. You know what I mean? You ask somebody to drive 50 miles, and that means that, you know, they're not going to be able to get something for their kid,
right?
Or something. You know, and it's that's why the Advocate Band, when we started that, I insisted with George and George too, and that everybody got like $25 for their gas money.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, because I said, look, you can't ask these people to drive here. I mean, they'll do it, a lot of them, but you know, it's nice if they get some money for their gas, and maybe they'll stop at McDonald's and get a hamburger on the way to the rehearsal. You know, I said, we really need to do that. I said, you don't have to do that for me, but I think in general we need to do things like that. We need to try our best. That's, I think, also one of the best ways to raise money.
Yeah,
is to not raise money for some project per se, because it's all a moving stuff. You know what I mean? Somebody gives you $100. Well, you can move that to here, or you can move it to there. You see, and so if you're raising money for somebody to drive, that means you're going to move money somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and the donation for that $100 for that person puts that other $100 somewhere else.
Right.
It moves, that frees up the money. So I've always been that way. Even when I play gigs, I'm playing a gig next week, actually night before the band festival at the country club, which I don't really like going to, but I'm doing it, and the piano player's getting paid twice as much as I am.
Yeah. Because
I'm going to donate the money I made to something.
Yeah.
And he needs to get paid because he's the piano player.
Right.
You know, I'm just a person that lives here.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, and that's the, now, like I say, I don't think everybody should do that, but I think if that was the basic attitude, and you could get a lot of people together thinking that way, that's, you know, some people go out and do Habitat for Humanity. Right. Some people work at the, I call it the Doggy Hotel, the Humane Society. Yeah. You know, and stuff like that. We love that, you know. And so, you know, people have different needs, but if you can find a way to tap into that part of people's humanity, for the young people especially, and all other people that are interested in music, especially today with everything that's going on and, you know, or not going on as the case may be, you know, it's I think it's important to be present with the music that we do, and I think people have noticed how different it is without music. We played in the park Tuesday night, yeah, with small version of our big band. And the place was packed.
Yeah.
At Moondance, that little place out there in Beaumont Center. And there was all kinds of people there, and everybody was saying, yeah, it feels good to be at a concert, doesn't it? Everybody's going, yeah. And they were still sitting separate, 6 feet apart, but everybody was there, and the place looked full. And
yeah,
I'll tell you what, it was challenging to get through the concert. I hadn't played a concert that long in a while. And by breathing, you're breathing. Everything it's different practicing.
Yeah.
Practicing's one thing. Playing with a whole band is another.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna find out tomorrow night. Triangle Brass Band's doing our first concert in a year.
Oh, great! That is so exciting.
We're out in a picnic shelter, and we're a field right by it, and we're hoping to get a bunch of people to come just because they want to see a concert. But like I programmed a lot of marches and a lot of chop killers just to get the band back in shape.
Well, that'll get people thinking anyway, right?
Yeah, hope so.
The reality will set in about halfway through the concert. People are going, "Oh my God, I haven't done this in a while." That's what I was thinking at my concert Tuesday night. I was going, "Yeah, boy, I think I can get through the rest of this."
That's rough. Well, Vince, thanks so much for
thank you
and doing this with us.
Yes.
Thanks for thinking of me. Thanks for thinking of me. I'm always glad to help, and you can always let me know if you need anything, and I'll do my best to help you.
That's why we love you, Vince, because you're always there to lend a hand.
Well, anytime. You just give me a call. When I come down to visit Gabriel next time, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know.
And then I'll come and do like a thing for